أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله الذي لا يبلغ مدحته القائلون ولا يحصي نعماءه العادون ولا يؤدي حقه المجتهدون، الذي لا يدركه بعد الحمم ولا يناله غوص الفطن. ثم الصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين، العبد المعيد الرسول المسدد المصطفى الأمجد المحمود الأحمد سيدنا ومولانا أبي القاسم محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين، لا سيما بقية الله في الأرضين روحي وأرواحنا الفداء، ولعن الله أعداءهم أجمعين إلى يوم الدين. أما بعد، فقد قال الله وقوله الحق. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ولقد خلقنا الإنسان في كبد. صدق الله العلي العظيم. صلاة على محمد. The potential and capacity of man has been our topic. Tonight is lecture number 3. The attempt since Saturday now has been to attempt to discuss this idea that we as a human being are far greater than we think we are. We have a capacity inside of us that not even we're aware of sometimes. And the sheer inner resolve, the sheer inner power that Allah has created us with sometimes is not brought to the forefront until and unless a hardship, a struggle, or calamity is placed in front of us. It's at that moment that we realize just how strong we are, how great we are, and how azim we are as a creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we've been trying to talk a little bit about the idea that following the Sharia of Islam, treading the path of piety, being a true Shia of Amir al-Mu'mineen, this all requires an immense amount of inner resolve and inner strength. The ayat that is the base of our discussion from Surah Balad that I've been reading in the khutbah for you for 3 days says, لَقَدْ خَلَقْنَا الْإِنسَانَ فِي كَبَدٍ. We have created mankind in the cradle of struggle. It's now up to the mankind to find that strength inside of them to conquer those hardships. And as I mentioned yesterday, sometimes Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala understands and realizes that unless and until there is a calamity on our path, a hardship in our life, we forget Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's how we are ghafil human beings. Today I want to speak a little bit about a quality called shuja'at in Islam. Because as you know, to follow the deen of Islam in this part of the world, to be successful at it at least, requires strength, requires courage. It's not easy. I'm not going to pretend like it's going to be easy. My youth out there who are right now fighting the fight, it's not easy, it's very difficult. It's a challenge nonetheless, and that challenge is something that we have to uphold, take on, and conquer, inshallah. Many times we see in the month of Ramadan, I hear oftentimes my parents tell me that my 7-year-old son kept the fast, let's say today, from morning until night. These summertime fasts are not easy, they're 16-hour fasts. And sometimes when that child comes to you at 7 years old, says, Baba, I want to fast, I want to keep rosa just like you are, and just like Ammi is, and you say, no, you're young, it's okay still. He doesn't want to be told that he can't do it, because to him it's a challenge. So you'll say, okay, fine, until 12 o'clock you have your rosa, 12 o'clock you have lunch, and then that's your rosa. No, he'll go as long as his sisters are going and his mom and dad are going. And mashallah, we have parents out there who come and tell me that my 7-year-old today kept a complete fast. It's not wajib on him. But he accepted the challenge by which his parents presented that in front of him. Why can't you and I have this exact same vigor when it comes to the challenge of Islam? My youth are so ready to pack it in and give up and say, I can't do this Islam thing, it's too hard for me. I live in the West, I'm not a youth in Iran, I'm not a youth in Pakistan or Iraq, where every corner of the street is a masjid, there's namaz time, so the adhan goes on. It's impossible not to be a pious youth in that part of the world. But here it's difficult. To get 5 minutes off work to pray my Zohar Asr is a challenge for me. To get the day of Ashura off is a challenge for me. To work and fast is a challenge for me. The challenge is in front of you. Allah understands exactly what area you reside in. That's why courage and shuja'at has nothing to do with physical strength. Imam Sajjad alayhi salatu his khutbah in the darbar of Yazid, I really want us to understand this. He says that we, the Ahlul Bayt, are defined by 6 qualities. Now understand that he was amongst the Shamis. The Shamis are individuals who had immense hatred for the Ahlul Bayt, who didn't know who the Ahlul Bayt were. Their only access to the Ahlul Bayt was Muawiyah. Muawiyah would continuously tell them through his propaganda, the Ahlul Bayt have nothing to do with Rasulullah. That's why he was able to convince 100,000 of his troops to fight against Ali and Safin. And yet there stood Imam Sajjad in the middle of these Shamis, describing for the first time perhaps who the Ahlul Bayt were. For the first time they had exposure to the Prophet's family. And of all the sifat that the Ahlul Bayt have, Imam Sajjad says what? Nahnu Asma al-Husna. We are the Asma al-Husna. There's no limit to what they have. He chose these 6 to introduce the Ahlul Bayt to the Ahl Sham. What 6? Ilm and Hilm. Knowledge and forbearance. Samahat and Balaghat. Dignity and eloquence. Shuja'at and Muhabbat fi qulub al-mu'mineen. Courage, and you'll find in the hearts of the mu'mineen love for us. He chose these 6 to summarize the Ahlul Bayt to those individuals who believe the Ahlul Bayt to have nothing to do with Islam whatsoever. The one area, let's discuss this tonight, is shuja'at. We believe that the most courageous individual is the one who sheds the most blood of the enemies, who's the most victorious on the battlefield, who chops off the most amount of heads. Absolutely not. Islam and the world of akhlaq defines shuja'at to be able to carry out that act that Islam requires you to do based on your zaman and your makan. I'll give you an example. Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salatu wasalam. While the Prophet was alive, with the exception of one war, he was there in every single jang of Rasulullah. No other warrior in the camp of Rasulullah killed the amount of kuffar Ali did. His 4.5 years of Khilafat al-Zahiri, he was busy with 3 civil wars. Siffin, Jabal, Nahrawan. In between that, from the time the Prophet passed away to his Khilafat al-Zahiri, the Zulfiqar never came out. And across 23 years, the dawn of 3 Khalifas, he was quote unquote silent. That silence alone requires a whole ashra. But nonetheless, he didn't take up arms. Now, in that area, you know that Abu Sufyan approached Amir al-Mu'mineen and said that, look, Ali, after Saqifa, this Khilafat is the Mal of the Bani Hashim. They have no rights to make themselves Khalifa. You simply give me the go-ahead, I'll have my troops here ready, you and I will fight for your Khilafat back. an opportunity for Amir al-Mu'mineen to have his God-given right back to him. And he chose not to. And if you want to feel the pain of Amir al-Mu'mineen, read Khutbah Shakshaqiyah, Khutbah number 3. As an alim said once, you put all the wars Ali went through, from Amr ibn Abdaud on one side, to Marhab on one side, to Muawiyah on one side, and you put the door of 3 Khalifas on the other side. What was the most difficult time of Ali was his silence in those 3 years, in those three eras. Read the pain of Amir al-Mu'mineen Khutbah Shakshaqiyah. He says, the old died away, the young became old. I still am sitting here waiting for my God-given right to be given back to me. I'm living in a stage where, as you've heard, one arrow in my eye and one bone in my throat. A very painful description of a man who was Haidar al-Karrar, right? Fatih Khaybar. Those 20 plus years of his silence was Ali's shuja'at and his courage. His sabr at that moment was the most difficult thing he could have done. But the zaman and the makan and Islam at that moment required him to be asfar al-sabirin, and that was Ali's courage. Not the 70 kuffar he killed in Badr, not the door of Khaybar he ripped in the war of Khaybar, not what he did to the Khawarij in Nahrawan, none of that. But at that moment when Islam says, Ali, put the Zulfiqar away, right now I need you to be patient, otherwise there'll be a civil war, Islam will be nabud, they'll be destroyed. And he did just that. Imam Hassan saw with Muawiyah, the most difficult thing of his life was his shuja'at. Imam Hussein lived 10 years, from 50 Hijri to 60 Hijri, while Muawiyah was Khalifa. His brother Hassan Mushtaba had already passed away. He lived there. He didn't do anything against Muawiyah out of respect for the soul of his brother. Those 10 years of Imam Hussein was his shuja'at. Abul Fazl Abbas, a man who was chosen for the day of Ashura. No? A man who was chosen to defend Hussein on the day of Ashura. We have several times in our maqtals that say that Abbas approached Hussein and said, Mawla, please give me ijazat. The sound of al-atash I can't bear anymore. I know that if you give me a lamha of ijazah, this whole thing will be over. The kids will get their water, you will now no longer have to go through your mazlumiyat. But Hussein didn't give him ijazat for war. He says, Abbas, we're not here for that. We're here for something else. He put his sword away. His ability at the age of 33, at the age of his youth, he was a giant of a man. He was a warrior, Abbas. Some say he sat on the horse and his feet dried in the sand. He was a monster. He would come out and the enemies would run the other way. This man, at this youth, was told to put the sword away, and he did without hesitation. Because Islam and the wali of his time and the zaman and the makan that he existed in at that moment required him to put the sword away. And he did. And that was Abbas's shuja'at. The courage that you and I need to show in today's day and age, in this Western world, my youth especially, is to understand that the inner courage you have to find to follow Islam, given your zaman and makan, is the shuja'at that you and I have to follow. It's extremely important that we understand. To be a shaji in Islam is to be vakhshanas, is to be makan shanas, is to understand where you are, what my responsibility is, and then anjam that responsibility. Fulfill that obligation on your head. And yes, it requires an immense amount of inner strength and sabr. But we are right now in the days of Muharram and Safar, the days of Imam Sadat and Bibi Zainab. If we can embody the beauty of sabr and forbearance and courage, these two personalities come in front of us. The sabr of Imam Sajjad, the sabr of Bibi Zainab is a lesson that we extract from Karbala, no doubt. Because we have in our hadith from Imam Ali alayhi salatu wasalam, he says there are 3 types of sabr, and you've heard this several times. Sabr ala musiba, sabr ala ata, sabr anil ma'siyah. Right? Patience when it comes to hardship, patience when it comes to following the deen of Islam, patience when it comes to your own guna and your own sins. Now each one requires explanation, and mashallah you are the Ahl Ilm, you know exactly what each 3 require. What Imam Sajjad showed was the second one, Sabr ala ata'a. I mentioned in the very first lecture, what halat Imam Sajjad was when he stood in front of Yazid and the Shamis during his khutbah. The suffer he had from Karbala to Sham was not an easy one. I mentioned that when he asked Yazid to speak, Yazid first said no. He knew exactly the power of the speech of the Ahlul Bayt. But the people around him had convinced Yazid that this individual who's in shackles right now, who just saw the most gruesome shahadat of his father and his brothers and his cousins and his family members, what possible disturbance could he create? Let him say a few words. What's the big deal? He's a prisoner of yours. They didn't realize that he had the lisan of Ali. He had the tongue of Ali. Nor did they realize that in that short speech that he gave, he shook the walls of the darbar. He did. But that was his sabr. He realized at that moment, my obligation as the Imam Evat is to create awareness. I could be in any state that I want to be in, shackled, blood dripping from my wrists, completely tired, bimane Karbala, everything. But the idea of me not fulfilling my obligation towards Allah wasn't an option. No excuse Imam Sajjad used, halakit, he could have used that every excuse in the book to not fulfill that obligation, but in that situation, he was able to carry out his wajibat at that moment. A message for you and I. A lot of times, I can't pray salat. Why? I'm at work 14 hours a day. I come home, I read all my salats in one shot, and I go to sleep. I can't fast, it's too hot here. I can't do this because I can't control my nafs because of this, and this, and this, and this. All these excuses we have, when it comes to sabr ala ada'a, is not there in our books when it comes to Imam Sajjad. I came across a very interesting tradition today about sabr. I want to share with all of you. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Look, the reality is that all of you know who I am. I was born and raised in this city. I went through school in this city. I went through work in this city. I'm not going to sit up here and tell you it's very easy to become a pious individual in this part of the world. It's difficult. It's very difficult. And sometimes hopelessness and depression begins to enter our system. We've convinced ourselves that I'm going to have a horrible akhirah, so I make my dunya my jannat. I've had youth actually tell me, I know I'm going to get my punishment in that world, I might as well live my life in this world and deal with whatever I have to deal with in the next world. That's shaitan's whisperings, by the way. That's not Allah's ilham. It's waswasa of shaitan. The hadith is this, it's a very beautiful hadith, it's a hadith of hope as well. Imam Jafri Sadiq alayhi salatu wasalam, he says, Inna subbirun. We, the Ahlul Bayt, are very patient. Wa shiyatuna asburu minna. Allah Akbar. And our Shias are more patient than us. The hadith says that the companion there says, Mawla, with all due respect, how is that possible? That your Shias are more patient than you are? He says, Nasbiru ala ma na'lamun. We are patient in the state that we have knowledge of what will happen after our patience. Wa shi'atuna yasbiruna ala ma la ya'lamun. My Shias are patient even though they have no idea what's going to happen after their patience. Look at the beautiful tradition of Imam Sadiq. That's not hope for all of us? How many times do we have this idea of how much more patience do you want, Allah? One tragedy, one calamity, one suffering, one suffering. I've been asking for someone to come and marry my daughter. She's almost 28 years old, 29 years old. Her friends are getting married. She's not getting married. Something wrong with my daughter? Do you have ta'weez, a dua, anything, Maulana, to get her married? There's a lot of stress in our communities about many, many issues. And we're told what? Be patient, be patient, be patient. Until you get to the point where you say, you know what, this patience, it doesn't work for me, I'm sorry. I can't be patient anymore. Imam Sadiq is saying that we are your leaders. We recognize that you are far more patient than we are. What a beautiful tradition that is. It's a hadith of hope for us. To understand that yes, this idea of courage is very difficult, but it's not impossible. And those individuals who have achieved anything in this world have done so by enduring hardships. Nabi Isa has a very beautiful statement. He says, you will not attain what you love. You will not attain what you love until you endure what you despise. What a beautiful statement that is from our Prophet. You will not attain what you love until you endure what you despise. Many times we believe that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is punishing us with one struggle after one struggle. He says, no, it's an avenue for your bulandi. I'm helping you reach me. I'm not helping you lower yourself. It's not the situation where we believe that Allah's adab is on those who have one calamity after one. No. This dunya is part and parcel of the equation. But if we don't have that courage inside of us, if we don't understand that patience inside of us, it becomes very difficult. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala. One point I made in the very first lecture I want to repeat here very quickly. The one thing that sometimes we lack is qadr al-shanasi of our own selves. We haven't understood our own qadr yet. We haven't understood the fact that Allah holds us to be His best creation. And He has immense plans for us. He sees potential inside of us. I mentioned the conversation between Him and the angels, right? The angels had a big problem with the fact that Allah's going to create us. They actually had the himmah to go and challenge God and say, please don't make this human being. He'll create problems on this earth. All He knows is khun rizif, fasad and fitna. That's all He knows. Don't do it. Allah says, Inni a'lamu ma la ta'lamun. I know what you don't know about this human being. And that's the potential that lies inside of us. The ability for us to be higher than angels exists inside of us. You see, look, the example is very simple. When the CEO of a company, a grand company, goes away for 6 months, and he wants to choose somebody to represent him during his absence. He doesn't choose a first entry or level entry individual who just started the company 2 weeks ago. Nor does he choose that guy who comes at midnight to clean and vacuum the floors. He chooses that individual who has the closest qualities to him to know that my company will continue to run in my absence. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wanted this kingdom, this universe, to understand and have ma'arifat of Him. He chose the insan and all his sifat to represent Him in this world. Because He realized that yes, you understand my Asma al-Husna, I taught Adam the names, and Adam regurgitated those names back to me, but not only that, you can be a manifestation of those sifat in this world as well. Our qadr is far greater than even we believe it is. But sometimes, that qadr results in this idea we become so egotistical, so full of ourselves. One point I was making in a majlis on just yesterday in a house majlis was about jahalat. I know some of you were there at that majlis. I mentioned that jahalat isn't a state of the aql. Jahalat is the state of the akhlaq of the human being. If you are, mashallah, or you've had tawfiq all of a sudden in your life to read a couple of books, to now have this shawq of ilm and alim both, where you've lived your life for 25 years how you want to live your life, mashallah. No care for Allah's deen, no care for the Sharia. All of a sudden now you have your spark, mashallah, your epiphany, your aha moment, as we call it in the Hausa. And now all of a sudden you have this life that's turned around, mashallah. It's great, alhamdulillah, it's fantastic. But what ends up happening is that we forget that I used to live a life 5 years ago that didn't really match my life right now. So now all of a sudden we believe ourselves to be a marja, ayatollah, mujtahid almost, because we've read a couple of extra books. And that ilm we think is erasing our jahalat. It's not, it's adding to our jahalat. Because that ilm now is making us a closed-minded, narrow, egotistical individual. That ilm that cleans our akhlaq, that ilm removes jahalat. But that ilm that adds to our ego, adds to our self-conceit, makes us, judge others based on what they know, what they don't know. That ilm is not removing jahalat, like I said, it's adding to your jahalat. Jahalat is a state of the akhlaq, not the state of the aql and intellect. Because the reality is that ilm should not make you so close-minded. Ilm should not make you individual who now you're labeling every single individual in front of you, a muqassar, a wahashi, mashallah, these new words now, and this and that and this and that, all of a sudden because you've read a couple of books. And now you challenge those individuals now who have spent 50 years serving the deen of Islam. That's ego. And you become more and more jahil in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So I ask you, be careful of that. This idea that we understand our qadr is not a ticket for us to be egotistical in our ways. Just in case we start to think we're more than what we are, he reminds us. He reminds us in a very funny way sometimes. He says, I wonder about man. He entered this world where he was a drop of najis fluid. And he'll end up after this world powder in his grave. In between, he is a vessel of feces. You empty the vessel, you fill it up. You empty it, you fill it. That's all we are. And yet he walks around like he knows everything. Ajib. Just in case we get a little bit high, he says, wait a second, let's bring you back down a little bit. One level. Let's not get too high. To the point where you start to believe you're Allah, etc., etc. So courage in this fight of Qadr Shinasi is extremely important. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Now I want to share with you a verse in the Quran that talks a little bit about this idea of Qadr Shinasi. The Quran says, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, وَلَقَدْ كَرَّمْنَا بَنِي آدَمَ. We have honored the children of Adam, human being. We've honored them. وَحَمَّلْنَاهُمْ فِي الْبَرِّ وَالْبَحْرِ. We've taken them from the land and the sea. وَرَزَقْنَاهُمْ مِنْ طَيِّبَاتٍ. We've given them risk from the tayyib things, from the pure good things. وَفَضَّلْنَاهُمْ عَلَى كَثِيرًا مِمَّا خَلَقْنَا تَفْضِيلًا. And we have given them fadilat, preference, distinction over all the other creations that Allah has created. The reason why I constantly talk about Qadr Shinasi to my youth especially, is because sometimes we feel like the decisions that we make as youth, and I'm with you on this, is that we don't understand that God had a bigger plan for us than what you have done with your life. Decisions that sometimes we make show that we don't understand how valuable we are in Allah's eyes. Because the Bible says, if you're going to sell your soul out in this world, if you're going to sell your soul out in this world, then sell it for a price higher than Jannah. Because that's what you're giving up. That's what you're giving up. You believe yourself to be just a part of this world, nothing in the akhirah. Fine, live your dunya in this world as your Jannat, but this Jannat of yours better be higher than the Jannat in the hereafter. Because that's exactly what you're doing. We make decisions not understanding the consequences of our actions. Nowadays in our youth, what we're trying to do is instill a little bit of fear inside of them. They're fearless nowadays. They don't have fear of God, they don't have fear of their parents, they don't have fear of the consequences. They'll do it and then they'll say sorry later, as they tell me. Right? We at least had fear of our parents. And when I say we, our generation. Those of you who knew my father, Marhum, you knew that he would just give one ishara, and that's enough for me. He didn't have to say anything. Nowadays, mashallah, the kids will give that same ishara back to the parents, and the parents will sit back down. I don't know what's going on. And when you ask the parents, he's 7 years old. Well, he's a tough kid. Uncle, you're his father. Anyways, so I mean, the idea here is that we're trying to get this point home. That there is an immense amount of capacity inside of the human being. And to fulfill that capacity, we require a lot of courage, a lot of sabr and patience. And sometimes what ends up happening is we don't allow ourselves to think about what's going to happen later on. But let me tell you and share with you a small story, and then we'll move towards Masayib. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. I remember when I entered the Hawza in Iran, I had this conversation with an ustad of mine who turned out to be someone who's very important to me. And they would play a lot of mind games with you to see if your niyat is right or not. So they would play advocate roles. So I was there the first 6 months, and he would ask me, "You're from Canada?" I said, "Yeah, I'm from Canada." He says, "What are you doing here?" So why do you want to be here? Why would you leave that world and that life where the world is trying to get there? You leave that place to come here. You have all these resources, all these services there, mashallah, the great West, alhamdulillah, where money falls off trees, they think, you just grab them and you go pay for your bills. You come here to a desert, where the water that comes out of the taps in Qaim is salty water, you can't even drink the water. It's hot here, the people aren't very nice here. Why would you come here like that? And you give the typical answers, right? I'm here to save my akhirat and save my grave, and it's true. And then I mentioned something that he didn't like. And I'm telling this story for a reason. I said that I want to go back and I used the word save the youth of my community. You say subhanallah, he got angry. He said, have you saved yourself first before you're going out there and saving everybody else? He goes, who are you to go out there and save the community? Do you really believe that you have this gift inside of you to save the community? Wear your cape and put a big moon and star on your chest and go and save the world? He goes, worry about yourself. You're not here to save anybody else. And then he said, the deen of Islam doesn't need you to save anybody else. Meaning he completely just pulled the rug out of me, and I fell flat on my face in front of him. And it was a lesson that I've learned and I've taken since day number one. He said, remember that the deen of Islam is Allah's deen. He will protect it, He'll take care of it. The same Allah who used Fir'aun to give tarbiyat, food and shelter to Musa, a prophet of his, only to have that same prophet turn around and destroy the kingdom of Fir'aun. If Allah can use someone like Fir'aun for his purpose, He can do whatever He wants. So save yourself first, everything else will fall into place. Sometimes as volunteers of centers, sometimes as youth, we believe that we have to go out there and save the world and save the masses and save our families. Worry about yourself. Worry about your own grave. In the process, when people see that you're treading the path, they'll want to join you on that path. That's where the key is. I asked him, I said, what about Amr bin Maruf and Nahi al-Munkar? He goes, no. Amr bin Maruf is not with your tongue. It's with your actions. When they see that you've come back to your community and you change yourself, then they'll want to jump on and whatever your path on, they'll jump on your path as well. But don't think for a moment that the deen of Islam needs Asad Jafri to save it. No, it doesn't. It doesn't. You need the deen of Islam to save yourself, not the other way around. Because when we first get there, you know that we learn Persian for the first 6-7 months, Farsi. And they have these small little books that they teach you. I told this story before. When I first got there, I was in a room, and there was a wall of toys on the room. And every single stuffed animal and toy car had a sticker and had the Farsi name for it. And he'd walk around and he'd pick up the car and he'd come to me and say, you know, Inchie, what is this? Like I was a 5-year-old child. What is this? I said, this is a car, it says in Farsi, in machine ast, in car. Cool. So it, you know, the process was very, very humbling. It got to the point where we had these little small books that we learned Farsi in. In those books, they had little short stories. They would tell us a good moral, at the same time teach us Farsi as well. I want to share one story from those books, and then we'll move towards Masai, inshallah. It's good for our youth to understand a little bit of what's happening. We're talking a little bit about sometimes making decisions knowing full well what your aqibat will be like. The Quran says what? فَصِينُوا فِي الْأَرْضِ فَانْظُرُوا كَيْفَ كَانَ عَاقِبَةَ الْمُكَذِّبِينَ. Travel the earth, walk amongst the people, and look at what the aqibat, what the conclusion, what the ultimate destiny is of those who deny Allah, and save yourself from that. The story is that there was a man on a ship, and the ship crashes in the water. He holds on to a piece of the boat and is able to float himself onto the shore of an island. Exhausted, tired, thankful that he's alive still. He's lying there huffing and puffing on the island. All of a sudden, at least 20, 25 people go running towards the shore of the island, grab him, put him on a huge chair, put a crown on his head, put a robe around him, and said, all hail you, you are the king of this island. He's confused, just like you and I would be. No idea what's going on. Maybe you have the wrong person, maybe you have no idea who I am. I just got here to save my life. You've made me king now of the island? Now he's saying that every riches, every resources, everything is, he's a king, right? He has exposure to everything. So he thinks to himself, why should I say anything? Let's enjoy this for a while until they recognize I'm not the king. 6 months pass and nobody stops him from being king. Now on the island there is a lawyer or a hakim, someone who's very wise. He pulls him aside. He goes, come here for a second. He goes, you know that I'm not the king of this island. What is this hikmah? What do you guys do here? He goes, well, we have a custom. He goes, what's your custom? He goes, every year, just like you, people wash up to our island. We make them king for a year, and then we throw them back in the ocean to die. He said, what? He said, yeah. A year to the date that you washed up on this shore, you'll be thrown back in the ocean. We make you king for 1 year. He goes, what do I do? He goes, I have a plan for you, but there's a condition. The condition is that you include me in your plan. There's no problem. Because there is an island off the coast of this island, way this way, let's say. It's a deserted island. You are, mashallah, the king for this island, at least for 6 more months. You're the king of this island. You have at your resources everything possible in this island. You have the workers, you have the material. If I were you, I would begin to slowly but surely transport your goods from this island to the next and build your kingdom on that island. And exactly 1 year to the date when they're going to throw you in the ocean, you have somebody transport you towards that island and you live in your kingdom as you built it. The condition is what? You take me with you to the island. It's a great plan. And exactly 1 year to the date that he washed up on the island, the Hakim was right. He took off his crown, took off his robe, and dumped him in the ocean. He had 2 speedboats ready, 1 speedboat for him and 1 speedboat for the Hakim. And they traveled towards the island. And they lived there. And the story goes on to tell us that we equally will be dumped into the water of the hereafter one day, someday. We can either at that moment begin to scramble and be a little bit reactive, or from now begin to transport from here to that world brick by brick. So that when we end up in that water, will be taken to our destiny that's been waiting for us. Sometimes we believe our qabr has snakes and serpents and God knows what else waiting for us. Your qabr, my qabr are completely empty right now. There's nothing in there. What is in there is what you will take from this dunya with you. The Holy Prophet says that the mayyat goes to the qabristan with three things. Ahluhu, maluhu, wa amaluhu. His family, his mal, and his actions, his deeds. Two come back from the qabristan, one remains. His ahl and his mal come back after dafan, his amal remains with him. Let's try to take this deen of Islam seriously. Let's try to remove the veils of jahalat from our eyes. Understand that everything that we say and do, we will be held accountable for. Every email we sent, every conversation we have, you will be asked about. And let's do it in the name of the Imam of our time. Because the reality is that the deen of Islam, and specifically the deen of Shiism, came in this form at a very heavy price. Our Imams did everything in their power to maintain this deen madhab of ours. They sacrificed one thing after another. But all of them have the exact same slogan on their lips. All of the Imams, all the Prophets. When they speak about Imam Hussein, they say, La yawma ka yawmaka ya Aba Abdullah. But Aba Abdullah, there is no day like your day. The sacrifice that we have for Imam Hussein is something that I really want all of you to understand. You hear about this in the first 10 days of Muharram, of course. Ayatollah Naini narrates a very interesting tradition. He says that one night I was reading the Musibat of Abu Abdullah, and in my dream I saw that Mawla was standing in front of me and he was covered in arrows from head to toe. And the next night after I read another Musibat, I saw him again in that dream. And this time all the arrows were gone except for 2 arrows. I said, Mawla, last night you were covered from head to toe in arrows. Tonight you only have 2 arrows. He said, Naini, when my Shias cry over my musibat, these arrows are taken out of my body one by one. He said, then Mawla, what about these 2 arrows? He said, Naini, these are 2 arrows that no matter how much my Shias cry for me, the arrows will remain. He said, 1 arrow is the arrow of Ali Akbar, and 1 arrow is the arrow of my Abbas. When Abu al-Fazl Abbas approaches Imam Hussein and says, Mawla, give me ijazat to at least get water for the kids, Imam Hussein would time and time again say, Abbas, you are the alamdar of my lashkar, of my army. There came a time where Abu al-Fazl Abbas looks around him and says, Mawla, what army is left that I am the alamdar of? When Abu al-Fazl Abbas was given permission to go towards and get water, sometimes we hear the musibat and we let it slide. He was able to get to the banks of Furat, meaning the shuja'at of Abbas was such that he was able to fight off the enemies to the point where he was able to fill the mashki and still be able to have, as you've seen in that very infamous image of Abu al-Fazl Abbas, and there's water in the palm of his hands. But never once did I read in any maqtal that Abbas took even a sip of that water. How could he? when on one ear you have al-atash of the small kids, on one ear you have the dry lips of his Mawla Hussein. Asad Abbas throws the water, grabs the mushk and the alam in one hand, mounts his horse, begins back towards the khayma. These people understood that if that water gets back in the tent, the whole destiny will change. One mal'oon comes and chops off the right arm of Abbas. Abbas grabs the alam and the mushk in the left arm. Another mal'oon comes and chops off his arm on the left arm. He grabs the mushk in his teeth and goes towards the khayma. Umar bin Saad announces, if you want to break the man's back, then fire the arrow in the mushk of Sakina. It's at that moment an arrow came and struck the mushk. Water began to flow out. Abbas stopped his horse right there, turned his horse back around. I will not go back to the khayma unless I have water for Sakina. And at that moment they ambushed Abbas. One threw rocks at Abu Fazl Abbas, one threw an arrow at his chest, and one mal'oon came and struck a spear so hard it broke through the cranium of Abbas and got to the bridge of his nose. It's at that moment that the arrow in his eye, and he began to fall from the horse. Ayatollah Naini still narrates that one night I read the musibat of Abu Fazl Abbas, and Shehzadi al-Fatima Zahra came in my dream and said, Naini, you read the musibat of my Abbas, but let those who hear the musibat know that when someone falls from a horse, they use their arms to break their fall. My Abbas had no arms. He fell on that arrow inside of his eye. He calls out, Assalamu alayka, Ya Aba Abdullah. Imam Hussein went running, took the head of Abbas in his lap, cleaned the blood, cleaned the dirt. He says, Abbas, do you have nasihat? He goes, Mawla, I have two wishes. One wish is this, that my mother told me I would not open my eyes in this world until I saw your face. I want to leave this world now and sending my akhri salam to you, Mawla. But there's an arrow in one eye, there's a blood in the other. He cleaned the eyes. Is there a second nasihat? He goes, yes, Mawla, leave my body right here at the banks of Furat. I don't want to face the sharmindagi of Sakina. When the alam came back to the khayma, and Bibi Sakina came out, she saw the alam, she didn't see the alam dar. My heart tells me she went out to the Maqdal and said, Chacha, your Sakina is not thirsty anymore, Chacha. سَيَعْلَمُ الَّذِينَ ظَلَمُوا أَيَّ مِنْ مُنْقَلِبٍ يَنْقَلِبُونَ إِنَّا لِلَّهِ وَإِنَّا إِلَيْهِ رَاجِعُونَ. We ask you, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to accept this qaleel ibadat, inshaAllah. We ask you, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to instill the shuja'at and courage inside of us to establish the deen of Islam in the West, inshaAllah. We ask you, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, within the hearts of our youth to convert the pleasure of sin to the pleasure of worship. We ask you, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this dunya has so much gham in it, but all we ever want is gham Hussein. We ask you, Allah, so long as there is life inside of us, give us the opportunity to cry over the shahadat of Abu Abdullah. We ask you, Allah, there's so much injustice in Syria, so much injustice in Pakistan, Iraq, Afghanistan, all over the world. Innocent blood is being shed. The only solution that we see is the coming of your wali. We ask you, Allah, hasten that reappearance of his, inshallah, and allow us to be beside him during his mission. Maulana Hussein.